Hi, today I'm going to talk to you about Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale, and I'm going to really focus in on the handmaid, the idea of the handmaid, and the biblical allusions to handmaid. So today you'll know all about handmaids, just like Maria. So this will help you in your study of the Handmaid's Tale, and we're going to look at Old Testament handmaids and one New Testament handmaid. The first thing to know is that the idea of a handmaid is all about fertility. They are used in the Bible as maidservants who are there to serve the wife, but in particular, the ones that Margaret Atwood picks out from the biblical stories are the ones who are used in order to create children. Now, fertility is quite a huge preoccupation of women in the Old Testament. Some of them are barren, that's the word that's used, and they crave having children to produce a line for their family and for their husbands. And it's seen kind of as a mark of honour to be able to do that, and in particular to bring forth sons. There are some real problems for women when they can't produce children in the biblical society. And also we find that women, as they get older, begin to worry about this and speak with their husbands, speak with God, speak with other women, and are really in that urgent stage of needing to provide an heir before they are too old. So there's three key places that Margaret Atwood is referring to in the Old Testament. I'm going to look at those to begin with. There is Rachel and Jacob, who have a handmaid, Bilhah. There is Leah, who's Rachel's sister, and Jacob, they share a husband, and her handmaid is Zilpah. And then the one I'm going to talk about most is Sarah and Abraham and their handmaid Hagar. You can see the references up here. Rachel and Jacob, Genesis 30, 1-5. Leah and Jacob, Genesis 30, 9-12. Sarah and Abraham, Genesis 16, 2-6. And in those places you'll find the stories of Bilhah, Zilpah and Hagar. I'm going to start first with Rachel. So Rachel finds herself in a difficult situation. She is the favoured wife of Jacob. Her sister Leah is also married to Jacob. Leah is providing some children, but Rachel is struggling to provide children. So she thinks about her situation and she decides that really, in order to have children, she's going to have to take action. So what she does is she speaks to her husband. She says to Jacob, and I'm quoting here, "Behold my maid Bilhah, go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees." Now this is really key for Margaret Atwood's text, because we get those dramatic scenes where the maidservant, the handmaid, and the wife are actually joined together at the moment of conception and then at the moment of giving birth. That the wife is present and the maidservant, the handmaid, is a kind of surrogate mother. It's an early type of surrogacy, really. Except there was actual sexual intercourse rather than it all being done in vitro, in a more medical test tubey way. So what we're having here is the real close contact, and this goes right back to the Bible and Rachel with that phrase, "she shall bear upon my knees." So when she's giving birth, she will give birth. There isn't a suggestion that Rachel was there at the conception of the child, but there is certainly the suggestion that Rachel wanted to be there at the birth of the child. So really quite a difficult relationship there. Now, Leah also, when she hears that Rachel has taken this method, when Leah is unable to have more children because of her age, she also takes on this method, and she offers her handmaid to her husband. Now, of course, this is a very difficult relationship between the handmaids, the husbands, and the wives, and we see this reflected very much in Margaret Atwood's book. So moving on to Sarah and Abraham, this actually appears earlier in the Bible, earlier in Genesis, but I have decided to talk about it second because I think it's one with a little bit more detail worth developing, particularly regarding that relationship between wife and handmaid. So in Genesis chapter 16, Sarah is very frustrated. She's very old. She wants children. God has promised her children, but she's kind of not really trusting in God. And she says to Abraham, I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. Now, in the Bible, in the following verses, it references Hagar and Hagar's opinion about this. She does allow Abraham to sleep with her and create a child. But she says, and this is where I think it's very key for the Atwood, her mistress was despised in her eyes. So there we have the seeds of this really difficult relationship, and that word despised in her eyes, the tension really coming out there between the handmaid and the wife. Now, when Sarah goes to Abraham and complains about this, about being despised and about her treatment, Abraham puts his foot down and says, she's your handmaid, she's your servant, do to her as it pleaseth thee. And the Bible tells us, so therefore Sarah dealt with her harshly. And we can see here the very origins of this idea that Margaret Atwood has taken and developed, that there is harsh treatment and a really discordant relationship between wife and handmaid. And of course, it's a natural thing. Someone is being offered as a servant to service this man. Okay, I said we're going to talk also about the New Testament. And although this is perhaps less immediately contextually important, I think it also develops our knowledge of what a handmaid was. So in Luke chapter 1, round about verses 26 to 38, the angel Gabriel, this is the narrative of the birth of Jesus and the beginnings of Christ entering the world. The angel Gabriel appears to Mary and says, you're going to have this child. Mary says, I don't understand how that can be. How can that be? I have not been with man. And the angel Gabriel says, don't worry, God will sort that out. And in response, Mary says, I am the handmaid of the Lord. Be it done unto me according to thy word. Now, this is still a very popular prayer in the Catholic Church. You hear these words uttered in respect for Mary and referencing the fact that she said this. And she is seen here as someone who empties herself, becomes a vessel, becomes something that enables God to become incarnate, to become man in the world. So here again, we get a relationship where the wife has not had sexual intercourse, but is seen somehow to become pregnant. Now, this is referenced as the virgin birth in Catholic theology, but it's the same principle, that the mother of the child has become pregnant without sleeping with the father of the child. And here, these words that she utters, I am the handmaid of the Lord, really lays Mary open to be an instrument of God. Now, some might say that this is a privilege, and indeed the Catholic and Christian theology develops this to be a privilege, even though there is some debate about how it happened and who believes what happened. Some people might say that this is actually quite an abuse of Mary's freedom and putting her into a situation that is very complex and difficult. Now, she accepts it. She is keen to accept this. So that perhaps makes it seem a little better. We also get that a bit later on, when this handmaid of the Lord, Mary, goes to visit her cousin Elizabeth, we also then get Elizabeth talking about how blessed Mary is and how blessed she is. And Mary is talking to Elizabeth about the child, and the child is described as the fruit of thy womb. Elizabeth says to Mary, "Blessed be the fruit of thy womb." And so here we have the real physical connection between the womb and the fruit it brings forth, and the fact that Mary is doing a service for God and a service for humanity in the Christian tradition. And of course we hear this as a greeting in the Handmaid's Tale. Blessed be the fruit, blessed be the fruit. It's part of the greeting formula that the handmaids have with each other. But I raise that here because this is very clearly about the woman being the person who is impregnated and then bears the fruit. And of course, Mary is referencing the Old Testament here. She's a Jewish woman in these New Testament times, but of course she's very well versed in the scriptures and the stories from the Old Testament. And she's referencing here being a handmaid, just like Sarah employed Bilhah. So, really important for the Handmaid's Tale, the theme of women lacking fertility. Something has happened in the world where they have lacked fertility. In the Bible, it's because they're old or because they're barren. There's not widespread infertility, but there is this focus here on women being powerless because they lack fertility, and they have to get around that by employing other women. In the New Testament, there is a focus on God needing to be incarnate, needing to produce a son, and that's very much what we get in the Handmaid's Tale. So it's the men who need and want to have heirs, and in particular sons. But throughout here, we get this idea about women as servants. The wife as servants and trying to fix it for the husband, and employing other servants, naturally women, who then are brought in to try and fix it with the husbands. So there's all this kind of notion that the women are the people who have to fix it and who have to sacrifice themselves and their bodies. And certainly the women in the Bible were not very happy about doing this. Check in next time for some further Handmaid's Tale videos. I'm going to do one on general biblical references next. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to ping that like button and subscribe.